What's up, guys? So one of the best ways to learn FlutterFlow, to learn how to build apps, to learn no code is by practicing. And by practicing, I mean building apps. And it helps a lot that when you're initially trying to learn is that you stick to simple apps. Simple yet powerful apps, meaning that this is going to be a relatively quick app, an app that you don't have to spend a lot of time building, but this is going to be a very, very useful app, and it's going to be reactive, and it's going to do a lot of nice things. And so in today's video, I want to show you how to build a very simple app, but yet a very useful app. And this app that we're going to be building is going to be a tip calculator. And you may be thinking, well, this is a very, very simple app, but actually it's a lot more complex than it looks. There's some features, there's some functionality here that you have to implement that's not as straightforward as it seems. And so we're going to be building this exact app today with the keypad and everything there. And so you're going to learn how to build such an app and make it reactive and make it super useful. And by the way, if you want to view this app, clone this app, exactly the same app as I'm about to build in today's video, you can do so on my Patreon page. On my Patreon page, you will be able to view and clone all the apps that I've built on this channel in FlutterFlow, and also you're going to have access to extra content such as live streams and stuff like that. So having said that, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be building this from scratch. So we're going to create this app. We are going to call this tip calc. We're going to start from a blank app here, okay? We're going to skip Firebase. This is a very, very simple app. No Firebase, nothing like that. Just data, just calculations. And here we have a simple page here. And let's go ahead and rename this page. We're going to call this tip calculator, all right? So now we've done something. At least we've begun. If you click here, you see the widgets tree, okay, and this is the page that we have here. And so let's take a look at what we need to do. We need a bunch of fields. We need this input field, we need the slider, and we need two kind of read-only fields, these calculated fields. And we also are going to be building this keypad here so that the user can enter by pressing on the numbers here. So here we have a column. This is typically where you begin because the column extends all the way down. And so I'm thinking, let's go ahead and add a container here. And inside the container, we're going to add our input field. Okay, so if you type text, you're going to have a text field here. Let's go ahead and take this container and make it a little bit wider. Okay, that looks good. And let's see if we can nicely center it. And we can also create a height of maybe 50. So that looks good to me. This is going to be a nice input field. And let's go ahead and wrap this widget inside a row. This is good practice. And now we have a row that we can nicely center like this. Now, the nice thing about containers is that you can create a box shadow, which kind of gives it this nice look here, right? This really cool look. And let's take a look at our box shadow right here. And what do we have? We can also create an elevation. Okay, very nice as well. And we can also create rounded corners. Let's do 5, something like this. That looks kind of cool. And let's do a little bit of padding on the text, maybe of 5. Okay, that's nice. And let's go ahead and center this text field. All right, so that's what we have. Let's go ahead and give column a little bit of padding from the top so it has some room to breathe. And this is going to be our main input field, right? This is where you enter the bill that you receive before you calculate the tip and before you calculate the final value. Next, let's add another row for the slider. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this right here, this construction. And this thing, instead of a text field, we are going to add a slider. But first, I want to add a row inside because we're going to have a couple of other fields. We are going to have a slider, so I'm going to add a slider, but I also want to add a text field that's going to display the slider value. So we're going to come here, we're going to add a text field right here, and we're going to put it before the slider. All right, let's give it some padding here. Give it a little bit of padding from the top. Okay, that looks good. Let's center this, align it. Yeah, something like this maybe. Okay, that looks actually pretty good. Next, we need 2 more text fields to display the tip and the total, okay? So let's go ahead and duplicate this. And let's duplicate it again. All right. So we can delete this. And we can just put in a text field here. Delete that. And the same thing here. We can delete that slider. And we can even center this text field here. So it's nicely aligned inside the row. There we go. That's the row. Let's center it up. And that's centered within the row. Okay, that's perfect. Okay. So we have the input field. We have the slider that's going to display the value right here. Because the slider by default, it doesn't display it. And then we have these final calculated fields, all right? Now, the way this is going to work is that when we enter the value, or when it reads the value, we want this value to be stored in local state, because all of these, a lot of these other fields that we're going to be building, fields, the buttons, etc., they will need to read the value. And it's always good practice to kind of get this value from a local state, communicate it with the local state. So if we come here to the local state, what we want to do is we want to add a new value. And I'm just going to call it bill final, which is the final value of the bill. And this is going to be a double, right? It's a number, it's a double. We can persist it. I'm not going to persist it. It's not going to be persistent. And let's say the initial value is 10. Okay, when they load it up, it's 10. The bill is $10, all right? So if we go back here, what we want to do is we want this value to be linked to the local state. So if I come in here and I go to the text field, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this is a number, and the initial value is going to come from local state, okay? And we also want to format the value, okay? So we can say number format, we can say decimal, we can say automatic, display as currency. All right, so initially the value is 10. It's going to load up 10, okay? Next, I want this text field to show the slider, okay? So what I'm going to do is, first, I'm going to rename my slider to input slider. So I know this is an input field. Here, this text field, I'm going to say input bill, because it's also an input field. And right here, we're going to say set from variable. We're going to say widget state, we're going to say input slider, and we're going to format it as a percentage. But before we do that, make sure you have your slider configured correctly, okay? So if I click on input slider, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have it configured correctly, right? So if I come in here, click on my input slider, so the way it's going to work is that the minimum is going to be 0, the maximum is going to be 1, okay? Once we multiply it by 100, we're going to get percentages. But by keeping in this kind of range, it makes it easy to multiply the number, because a percentage is really, it's a fraction of 1, right? So the initial value is going to be 0.2, meaning that this is what the slider is going to have, 0.2. Step size is going to be 0.1, and that's it. That's all we need. And now, the initial value is 20%, which is kind of the standard tip in the United States. Minimum is 0, 0% if you want. Maximum is 1, 100%. Step size is 10%. So we're going to come in here, and this is actually set from the input slider. But we don't want to display 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. We want it to be formatted as a percentage. We're going to come here, number formatting. We are going to say percent, and it automatically multiplies it by 100, and that's that percentage value. We're going to say confirm. All right, so now we have the input field, which is linked to the local state. We got a slider. We got the value from the slider, and now we are going to have, this is going to be the tip, right? So how are we going to calculate the tip? We are going to have a function that's going to take this value and multiply it by this value. So let's go ahead and create this function. And that's actually very easy. We're going to go set from variable, and there's no way to do it in FlutterFlow. We need to multiply two numbers. Custom function, create custom function, and we are going to say calculate tip. Okay, we're going to return the double. Okay, is list false, nullable false. Here we are going to say this is going to be the final bill final, which is a double, false. And here is going to be the percentage or tip percentage, which is going to be a double also. And now this tip is going to be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. It's not going to be 30 or 40. That's just the formatting. It's going to be between 0 and 1. All right, we're going to go into code. And now we have the values. And all we have to do is this. Return bill final multiplied by tip percentage. That's it. Bill final is, let's say, 100. Tip percentage is, let's say, 10% or 0.1. Okay, then the tip becomes 10. Okay, very, very simple. We're going to hit save. And now we need to pass the parameters to the function so that it calculates it correctly. Okay, so this field is going to be the value that's going to be returned from this function called calculate tip. So we have the two arguments. Bill final. Now the final we wanted to pull from the local state because that is the source of truth of the value, right? We're going to come in here. We're going to say local state. Tip percentage is going to be this thing right here, which is essentially the slider, widget slate input slider. And we can also format it as currency, which is nice. We're going to say automatic display as currency confirm. And now we have a calculated field here, which is going to calculate this, and that. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this app and make sure at least what we have so far works. All right, so we have a quick error, which is not an error, which is kind of a warning, really. It's asking us to double check this function, this very, very simple function. Okay, no errors. So let's go ahead and run this app and see what we got so far. All right, so here's the app. The default value is 10. This is what it loads from the local store. We have default tip is 20%, and this is the result. And so if we move this, it automatically recalculates the tip. So this works, this loads it, but we also need to do it so that we can modify it here. And then we need to create a keypad where the user can enter value right from the app, from the keypad. Okay, so there are two things that we need to do. Well, more than two things, right? We need the final value to calculate the final value, which is relatively straightforward. We need to create a keypad, which is a little bit more involved. And we need to make sure that the user can enter value, and all of this is going to get recalculated. So even though it seems like a very, very simple app, there's a lot of things at play here that is important to understand, all right? So let's go ahead and create this keypad first, okay? How do we create this keypad? Okay, well, the way we're going to create this keypad is we have a column. We are going to add another element, okay? Another UI element, and we're going to be adding a grid view, okay? Now we have a grid view. Let's go ahead and give it a little bit of padding off on top, okay? So what this grid view does is that it allows us to display element in kind of a grid form, okay? And the elements we're going to be displaying are numbers, okay? So the way you do it is first, let's go ahead and add our UI element. So the way I want to do it is I want this to be a container. I want to wrap things inside a container because it makes things look a lot prettier. And inside the container, we're going to have a text field. And let's go ahead and format this container. Actually, let's do this grid view 10 everywhere. And this container, I really like this elevation. Really nice. We can add a box shadow. Really cool. Makes it gives it kind of a nice effect. And now we have the text. And the way I want to do it is I want the text to be in the middle, right? So you can kind of do this. This is a child. So if you put 0, 0, it's going to be right in the middle. Now, this text here is going to display the digits, which means we need a list of values 1 to 9 to feed to this grid view so that it displays the values. Well, how do you do that, right? We can go to the grid view and we can do a query type, but we don't have a database, we don't have a Firebase Firestore or anything like that. Well, we have to do something else, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to generate dynamic children from a custom function. You name it, a custom function that's going to generate our arbitrary list, okay? So if we come here, we can create a custom function, and this function is going to give us a list back of values 1 to 9. So It's going to say get list. Return data type is going to be an integer, which is a list, basically a list of integers. And the code, it's not going to take anything. There's no arguments. It's simply going to return a list of values 1 to 9. And the way we're going to do it is you can do something like this, a little bit of code there, and you can say generate. And this function is going to generate a list for us. So we're going to say we want 9 values. And here's where we need to specify how we want those values to be generated, okay? And so what we have here is an index. And in computer science development program, it always starts from 0. So remember that. So we're going to generate 9 numbers, and we have a value which represents the index. So index of 0. What do we want to do with that 0? We want to add 1 to it. So the way we do it is we add 1 to it, okay? Which is the same value, except we're plus plus, which is kind of like saying val plus 1, okay? And that's all we have. That is our function. Very, very simple function. And this function here returns 9 values starting from an index of 0, which is going to return 1. So starting from 1 all the way 9 values, right? So 1, 2, 3, and so on until we get 9 values. And that is our function right here. And what's nice about this, how we're doing it here, is that we are not getting values from a database, right? Because we don't have, we don't have values in a database that's a list of 1 to 9, right? 9 values. We need to generate this list. This thing generates a list, and we're going to call this item. I always call it items. If you've seen my previous videos, I call it item or items. I'm just going to say item. Confirm, confirm. And now this grid view is powered by that list of 1 to 9, okay? Now, what we need to do is we need to go into text, set from variable. We can access this item. No further changes. We don't need to format it, confirm. And now this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. until we get to 9. All right, so let's run this app and see if it does what we need it to do. So let's reload this app. And there we go. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's kind of small. I want it to be bigger simply because it's a number on a keypad. So let's go back here. Let's make it 20. How does that look? That looks nice. Let's go and see how it looks. All right, that looks a lot better. Isn't that nice? We actually have a keypad here. Let's go ahead and give it a little bit more padding here. Gonna come here. Grid view, let's give it a little bit more padding. And the padding we want to give it, let's give it a padding of 20. 20, let's see how that looks. Let's refresh it. All right, that looks good to me. I mean, you guys can play around with it, decide what looks better for you. This is all minor stuff. Now, the way this is going to work is that we have 10 here. If we click on any value, it's going to append the value. Okay, so if we click on 1, it's going to be 1.101, and it's going to recalculate everything. If we click on 2, it's going to be 102, and it's going to recalculate everything. Now, how do we do that? Okay, well, it's actually fairly simple, right? You can go to the container here, and on the container level, we are going to create an action, okay? We're going to open our flow editor, and we're going to add an action. So on tap, once we click on that individual digit there, what we want to do, guys, is we want to calculate a new value provided we have the existing value. So if it's 10, and the user clicks on 1, we want it to be 101. Now, what we want to do is we want to update the local state. Remember, we're not updating the widget. We're updating the local state where the widget, in turn, gets its value from, all right? So we're going to come in here. This is our first action here. We're going to go in here, and we are going to update local state. Where's our local state? There we go, update local state. Which local state? We only have one local state. And the update type, set value, value source from variable. And guess what, guys? We need another custom function, okay? We're going to come in here, custom function, and we're going to create a new function. And this function is going to be called append digit, because all we are doing is appending a digit that the user clicked on. There's a little bit more involved kind of behind the scenes, but what we're going to be returning is a new double. Okay, we're going to say double. Now for the arguments, we're going to be passing 2 arguments, the initial value and the digit that we want to append. That way the function has access to both values and it can do its magic, okay? So this is the initial value, which is a double, okay? And this is the digit, okay? Digit, which is an integer, okay? Digits are integers, okay? And now we need to build this function. So ask yourself, how can you do it? Okay, let's say we have 10. How can you turn 10 into 101 if somebody clicks a 1? Well, the way you do it is actually you take initial value, return initial value, multiply by 10, right? We are adding another digit. And because we're working in the base 10 system, we need to add a 10, and then we add the digit, okay? That is the way you want to do it. And so if the initial value is 10 and somebody presses 1, we multiply by 10, we get 100, we add 1, okay? And this works regardless, how many digits we have. If we start with 100, somebody, presses 2, we multiply by 10, we get 1,000, we add 2, okay? We are going to hit save. Now, that is the function we have. Now, we get a value back, and we need to update the local state again, okay? So, we get the value back, and this is what we're essentially updating the local state with. So, let's go ahead and pass those values. The initial value is going to be the local state, right? We're working with the local state, so we have the local state. The digit is what the user pressed, so from variable, which is the item, and that's all we have, confirm. And now the result of this function is that new value, which is going to become the new local state. Now there's something else we need to do. In order for that new value to be reflected, to be refreshed, we need to refresh the page. We're going to come here, navigate to home page. We're just going to do an instant. That way it's automatic. And that way, when they click on it, we are going to update the local state. This is going to pull from the local state, and it's going to refresh, and that way the new value is going to show up. All right? Let's go ahead and try this out. Let's check those local functions. All right, no errors. Let's reload our test environment. All right, so here's what we got. This is our 10. Let's go ahead and try 2. Okay, you see how it updated. It updated the local state, and then it refreshed the page. This variable was pulled from the local state. It shows 102, and everything else was automatically updated. So 20% is, as you can see, we can do that, and this is automatically refreshing, right? So 102, 20% is a little bit more than 20 bucks. Okay, look at that. Beautiful, right? Let's say it's 102. Let's say user presses 9. 1029, nicely formatted, 20%, and we get the value here. All right, look at that. So what's left? Well, what's left is this final value, which is basically a sum of this and a sum of that. And as you guess, this is going to be another very, very simple custom function to calculate it. So let's go ahead and do that right now. And let's go back to the app here. We have this thing here, set from variable. We're going to say custom function, and this is going to be add values. And guys, you can create this kind of function with 2 arguments, and you can reuse it in many situations because it's a fairly general, fairly generic function. So we're going to be returning a double, and we're going to take val1, which is a double, val2, which is also a double, 2 doubles. We're going to come here, and all we need to do is return val1 plus val2. Okay? We're going to hit save. And now we have the function. Let's go ahead and pass in the arguments. Okay, so the first argument is going to be this thing. And guess what? We're going to pull it from the local store. We're not going to use the widget here, right? Local store is the source of truth. Okay? From variable, local storage. Now this value here, this is a text field, so we have no access to it inside FlutterFlow. It's not like an input field. So what we need to do is, you guessed it, we need to recalculate it again using that existing function. So we're going to say, instead of pulling it from a specific variable, we're going to say, well, this is going to be a custom function, and this is going to be calculate tip, and we're going to recalculate that tip again. Okay, it's not a big deal. It's a very quick calculation. Bill final is going to be our local state. Tip percentage is going to be our, guess what? Slider, right? Slider. Confirm. Now we have the tip, we have the bill final. We're adding a bill final with the tip. Okay, and let's go ahead and format it nicely. Kind of the icing on the cake. Automatic, display as currency, and we have the dollar amount here. Let's take a look if that works. Hopefully, that's going to work. And we need to double check the functions for errors. All right, no errors here. Looks good. Let's go ahead and reload. All right, so what do we have? We have 10, 20% tip. That's $2 tip. 12 is the final value. Look at that. Look how beautiful it works. Let's go ahead and add a 3. Okay, 103, 20%. 103 plus 20.6, 123. And you can increase the tip. Let's add another one. Let's say we had a really, really big dinner. We went to like 4 seasons. Okay? We had a lot of people. And the bill came out to, let's say, 1,031. 20% tip. Let's say that, you know, the service was really good. Let's give it 30%. Actually, I'm thinking maybe the step in the slider, make it 0.05. So like 5%. That's another quick change. Otherwise, it's like 20, 30%. Maybe you want to leave a 25% tip. So we have a $300 tip, and then we have the final value this. That is kind of what we have. Another thing that we can add is we can add a 0, right? Maybe you just want to, you have 10, you want to add a 0, get it to 100. Another thing you might want to do is you want to add a backspace, right? This thing here, backspace, which deletes the values. And that's pretty much it. We don't need to do any of this. It does it all automatically. Everything works automatically. Maybe we can make the step 0.05 instead of 0.1. This is a nice change. But that is it. That is how you create a very simple app, but a very useful app, and really a very kind of dynamic, reactive, interactive apps, which is kind of, you know, what people want to see. They want to see these kinds of apps, all right? So take a look at this. Beautiful. Let me go ahead and change the step for the slider. All right, let's come in here, and we are going to say step size 0.01. All right, let's go ahead and reload this. See how it looks. All right, so now we can say 25. I can put 8, 3, and I can leave 25%. I can leave 30%. I can leave 15% if I wanted to. And that is precisely how you build a tip calculator with FlutterFlow and almost no code.